I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am.
Family, and welcome to our weekly Saturday morning broadcast. We are live on the Impact Network and we're streaming live on Facebook right now. And we have a lot of things to tell you, to share with you today. We are in the midst of getting ready for our next virtual HBCU tour. Usually we take a bus of students and we caravan the sides of the country, but this time, of course, in the midst of this pandemic, we are doing it in a very virtual manner, but it will still go on, and that will come to you later in this month, at the end of this month, and we want your children to take part in that. We also want you to know that we are still giving away food in the midst of this pandemic. We are surpassing the 80,000 mark. 80,000 meals have been given out from PUSH, and we need your help to continue to do so. We thank World Central Kitchen, and we thank the University of Chicago. We thank Let Us Entertain You. We thank Volare Italian Restaurant. We thank all of our partners, all of our sponsors that have helped make this a very possible reality. We also want you to be sure to become a member of PUSH. It's only $15 if you're a senior, only $15 if you're a student, and $35 for all of those in between. And that's for an entire year of a membership to PUSH. We must have you to join this movement, to join our fight in this struggle.
Thank you, Cameron. We appreciate all that you do with our food justice program and representing your generation as we talk about voter registration and voter engagement. And we're going to do some voter education. Cameron is going to talk about that in coming weeks. One of the things I want to do is congratulate Dr. Leon McDougall. He is now the national president of the largest African American medical association in the world, the National Medical Association. And so as a part of that, he also chairs our National Health Commission. Dr. McDougall has been working diligently to come up with protocols for us as we respond to this COVID crisis that we're in. Dr. McDougall and Dr. Deborah Ford Holden have helped us understand what we have to do to minimize our exposure to COVID and our contracting it. Also, we really want to congratulate our national board chair of the Rainbow PUSH Coalition, and that's none other than attorney C.K. Hoffler. She has now been elected to be the president of the National Bar Association. Again, the oldest African American association of black lawyers in the world. And so as a phenomenal trial lawyer, I am so excited that she is not only our chairman of the board, but she's also now head of black lawyers, which means we will be fighting for social justice, litigating cases and civil rights in every state in the country. We have the network, we have the talent, we have the power, and we now have a person who is committed to lead us in that struggle. Tomorrow it is so exciting. Reverend Jackson is being honored by the National Democratic Committee at the convention. They will open the convention on Sunday with a tribute to Reverend Jackson. He has been working to make the Democratic Party more inclusive of all races and classes. He started challenging the Democratic Party in the 1972 convention. But from 72 to now, he's been working to make sure that the rules, the party rules for candidates running for office were fair and equitable. But one of the things that many of you may or may not know is he fought for a woman to be on the ticket before we even imagined a woman of color would now be on the national ticket as vice president. And so you see Senator Kamala Harris today, it is because our time has come, which is what speech Reverend Jackson gave in 1984. Change can come. If you want to be a part of the change, you must register and vote. The other thing, we're having a census, a national census town hall. You want to be counted. Why do you want to be counted? Because when you're counted in the census, federal dollars flow to your cities and to your educational institutions. There are people out there ready to help you. Call PUSH, Freedom, 373-3366, just 773-FREEDOM, and we will help you get counted. August the 24th, Reverend is having a conversation with the great Dr. Fauci. I know you've seen him on television. Well, Reverend Jackson's going to be in conversation with Dr. Fauci and talking about and he and Dr. Fauci and Dr. Leon McDougall will share information about the impact of COVID, where we're going, what's happening, what you should worry about, what you should be concerned about. That'll be August 24th. We'll give you more details on that. And that's all I have. I don't have any more time. You know they don't give me much time, so I got to go.
Every summer, Push Excel brings you a state-of-the-art summer program. This year is nothing less. We are doing a virtual STEM program, and this year we will have theater, archaeology, music, arts, fitness, basketball, even Zumba. So, family, friends, everybody sign up, ages 7 to 15. Go to www.pushexcel.org for you to sign up for our virtual summer STEM program. As well as at the end of the summer, starting August 15, join us for our virtual college tour. We will have an entire week of activities for our high school students. Jump on the bus, www.pushexcel.org. All of our high school students, you will not be disappointed.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrows.
If we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Just come on, me brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean
new football conference has put off its fall season. The NCAA's Mountain West Conference postponing all fall sports, including college football. It comes after the Mid-American Conference canceled fall sports on Saturday. So will other major conferences follow suit? Joining me now is Nicole Auerbach. She's a senior college football writer for The Athletic. Also with us is Dr. Leon McDougall. He's a member of the NCAA's Coronavirus Advisor Panel and the Chief Diversity Officer at Ohio State University's Wexner Medical Center. Nicole, I want to start with you. The Mountain West Conference, for people like me who watch way too much TV over the weekend sports, that's Boise State. That's the blue football field. So these are teams that we know. What's the significance of Mountain West canceling yesterday?
Well, it's absolutely significant because this is the second major conference to do this. The Mid-American Conference postponed fall sports on Saturday. Now, we're not talking about the Big Ten or the Pac-12 or the SEC just yet, but these decisions put pressure on the schools and the leagues that are still trying to play because their medical advisory groups are telling them that it is not safe enough to continue with the testing and the protocols that are in place with travel without these athletes being in a bubble environment like the NBA or WNBA. So this is significant because it's just going to continue to put pressure on other leagues that have not yet made a decision about their fall football season.
So, Dr. McDougall, I know there are a lot of people, fans and otherwise, asking what's going on here? What happened the last week? Why are college sports having this moment of self-doubt? And I know you point to the fact that go back to the spring, go back to the very guidelines that the NCAA gave itself for reopening. These are the core principles of resocialization of collegiate sport. And number one on this list is a downward trajectory of COVID cases or positivity percentage. And all you have to do is look at the map around the country. And you can see there are plenty of states, plenty of places with major college football or college sports programs where they're not past door number one.
Yes, very good question, John Berman. And also I'd like to say, today I'm speaking on behalf of the National Medical Association as its 121st president, representing over 45,000 African-American physicians in the U.S. and as a member of the NCAA COVID-19 Advisory Panel. And you speak to the truth. And with this COVID-19, it's a societal issue, and we need to be placing a full court press on COVID-19, and that involves invoking a national strategy to mitigate this deadly disease. That involves invoking the Defense Production Act to create opportunities to produce PPE, to produce testing kits. And this notion that governors are suing mayors because they're asking the citizens to wear facial coverings is a reflection of why we are having such problems with opening up college sports.
Hey, you want to play football in Columbus? You want to play for Ohio State? Get the rate down in Columbus. That is an argument you will hear. Nicole, we have seen a number of prominent players and coaches from the most prominent programs come out over the last day and say, we want to play. Let's listen to Clemson.
We cancel football, the virus isn't going to go away. And it is fully my belief that these guys are safer here than without us. And not only are they safer here, mentally, it's better for them.
We feel safer here than anywhere else, honestly. And when you go outside of these walls and you go get food, you go do anything, you're at just as much, if not more, risk.
How universal or prevalent is this feeling among the athletes?
John,
well, it's mixed because we've had a number of players who have spoken out in the last day or so, kind of a Hail Mary 11th hour push to make it clear that they do want to play, which we all expected that they did. But you've also had movements in other leagues, including the Pac-12, where they have threatened to withhold their services. They have threatened to boycott because of their concerns related to their health and safety, as well as the economic impact of the amateur model. So I think that, it's hard to say that anything is a monolith. It's hard to say all college players feel one way or the other. But I do think it's worth pointing out here that, first of all, even if the season is postponed, they would be able to stay on campus and practice and have that environment that they feel safe in. And then also that this has exposed how little a say college athletes have in what happens to them. This is something that we have seen during the pandemic. They don't have a players union. They didn't have representation or a seat at the table when they were determining health and safety protocols like we saw in the pro leagues. So I do think no matter what comes out of this, the fact that players were speaking up and using their voice collectively is something that is good and will continue.
Agreed. I wish it didn't have to happen in a situation like this. Absolutely. Doctor, go ahead.
Can I speak to this? A feeling is not science. So a feeling is not a protocol. So those feelings should be used to advocate for testing and for PPE and for placing a full court press on COVID-19. So that's what the feeling should be used for.
Dr. McDougall, I get the sense that you have questions about whether it's safe for these players to be on the field playing right now.
We put forth a strong document through the NCAA Advisory Committee. It's a solid document, and provisions within that set parameters on being able to re-socialize and restart college athletics. And as you pointed to at the very beginning of this show, the provision is you're supposed to have at least a 14-day decline in infections in one's community, and people they're just skipping over that. And so I would hope that this focus being placed on collegiate athletics allows our country to reflect on the importance of addressing COVID-19 from a national perspective. And our governors need to link arms and form a shield of protection against COVID-19 until, and hopefully our national leadership will also put this at the highest level of priority. That's where we need to be. So sports is important, but is not as important as 160,000 people dying.
I have to let you both go, but Nicole, in 5 seconds or less, do you think that these conferences will announce, the Big 10, Big 12, SEC will announce that they're postponing this week?
I think we'll see the Pac-12 is meeting today. It's presidents and chancellors, so they could potentially make a decision at the very least to delay the season further and potentially postpone. It would be a huge domino if it falls today.
Nicole Auerbach, Dr. McDougall, I really do appreciate both your time. Really interesting discussion.
Thank you, John Berman.
November 4th, 1983, a day that will forever be etched in the minds and hearts of those who dared not to miss their moment and who dreamed seemingly impossible mountaintop dreams.
I rise to declare that I can and announce to you this day my decision to seek the nomination of the Democratic Party for the presidency of the United States of America.
On that glorious day, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. defied all expectations in a campaign that would radically expand the role of African American voters in national Democratic politics, becoming the second African American to launch a nationwide campaign for the presidency.
In 1983, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, civil rights leader and former protege of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., announced his candidacy for President of the United States. Jackson galvanized black people around the country to engage in a campaign for an office that most of us had thought a black person could never win. A black man or a black woman occupying the White House? That was the race's impossible dream.
Jesse Jackson wasn't the first African American to run for president. That would be Shirley Chisholm. But Jesse Jackson's run was incredibly exciting. It wasn't just we might get a black president. We might get a black president with a narrative and an agenda that actually represents what democracy could really look like in this country.
Young people across the country leapt at the chance to work on Jesse Jackson's presidential campaign, reaching out to voters far beyond the black community.
He brought the white feminists, the white farmers, the first GLBT leaders within the Democratic Party. He said, come and take a seat at this table. I have enough room for everybody.
Surprisingly, Jackson struggled to receive endorsements from many high-profile black politicians.
Most of the black leadership was against him running. They had their own arrangements with the Democratic Party and establishment. They didn't think it could work, but he ran, and he did very well, better than they all thought.
3.5 million people cast their votes for Jesse Jackson. Some estimated that as many as 20% of the African Americans who voted for him had never voted before. Though he fell short of winning the Democratic nomination, Jesse Jackson's 1984 presidential bid changed the political landscape forever.
Long before there was a Barack Obama, there was a Reverend Jesse Jackson, and he was lifting up little kids all across America, believing that they too one day can become president of the United States. He taught us that our voices matter, and we should leverage the power of our vote.
Good morning. We are in the midst of a major drive to get more members, more people engaged and involved in Rainbow Push, supporting the programs of Push for Excellence and the Citizenship Education Fund. If you're interested in public policy and you want to help change the policies that impact those incarcerated, change the policies that impact students attending colleges and universities. If you want to be a policymaker, then you need to join Rainbow Push and join by paying your $35 right now. Some of you watch us every week. You listen to us on the radio. You're viewing us in social media. We need you to become a member. It's only $35 a year. If you believe in the scholarships that we give to thousands of students each and every year, we've awarded more than $10 million to scholars year to date. What do you have to do to give and support Push? It's really very simple. You can go to rainbowpush.org if you're on a computer and press donate. Give any amount. Every dollar is important. You want to talk to somebody, call us at 773-256-2775. You can give right now, any denomination that you choose. You can text the word PUSH, P-U-S-H, to 41444. Text on your cell phone. Most of you have a cell phone. Just text PUSH, P-U-S-H, to 41444, and you can give any amount that you feel comfortable giving. Or call us 773-256-2775, or go to rainbowpush.org and just press donate. Wherever you are, you can support us as we keep pushing for you.
Hi, I would like to thank you all for joining us today. We are gathered here today with schools from all across the country. My name is Skye Jackson, and I'm a rising senior at Episcopal High School in Alexandria, Virginia, from Chicago, Illinois. I'm grateful to have been born into an environment that shaped my understanding of what's right and what's wrong. And I've learned to be more sensitive to the presence of racism within my surroundings, but specifically within historic and well-respected institutions. So my efforts to start a National Black Student Alliance and to initiate this national discussion on racism in education began with me being a student leader in communities that I love, and from that love, recognizing that some of those communities need to change. The recent Black At movement, where students are using social media to expose racism at predominantly white institutions, has shown us that racist comments about our hair, the use of the N-word by non-Black students and teachers, bigoted white parents making us feel like we don't belong, along with the countless other racist scenarios, happens everywhere. Traditions that are based in slavery and Jim Crow are all in contrast to the school's stated goals of making sure that all students are known, valued, and supported. And it happens nationally. But it's not just the traditions that needs to change. It's the curriculum, teacher-student relationships. We need to realize the mental health effects and that the fears outside of campus are even more real now. We have student speakers who will talk about all these topics and to show what it's really like going to a predominantly white institution today. And then we have our expert speakers, some of the most prominent national leaders in this day, like Dr. Marisol Baradaran, Dr. Mary Frances Berry, Dr. Eddie Glaude, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, Marcia Dyson, and Angela Rye. With the help of all of you, teachers, students, administrators, we pulled together this first national discussion, and those of us on this call today are from nearly every state in the U.S. We as leaders have an obligation to continue the trajectory of change that was started before us with saints who sacrificed their careers and even lives for us to be here today. The opportunity is now. In this season of protest, it is our job as students to take this moment as a new generation to aggressively stand up for what's right and to be the example and know that you aren't standing alone. We mustn't adjust or resent. We have to resist, surrender or fight back. And to surrender is not an option. Racism in the educational system is not just at one school. The problem is systemic and it's pervasive. It's at schools all across the nation. Private, selective, public, it's a societal issue, but we can fight on and we can fight to change the environment. Remember that no matter who you are or your background, there is room for you to make a difference and to be a part of the National Black Student Alliance. We want you to use our brave space. We want you to share your stories, and we want you to be heard. Thank you.
Let me say, number one, we're conditioned by environment. And we look at the same thing and see two different things. 1924 decision, for example, many whites saw it as for us a privilege. In fact, it was a right. We've been denied the right for 58 years since the Plessy versus Ferguson. This is in 1896. And so it was a right for us, an equal opportunity. And that laid the groundwork for so much. I remember talking to Ms. Rosa Parks, when I said, Rosa Parks, why you sit down? She said, I thought about 54 decision. I met with Turner Fred Brennan scientists on the front of the bus, challenged the system. Dr. King joined her, John Lewis joined him, and of course, the rest is history. And so today I want you to know that we play the life's game by two sets of rules. So in spite of those who are down, you've never earned the right to do less than your best. There's some notion that we must maximize what we have and fight for what we need.
I just wanted to say that I think it's wonderful that the students have gotten together to put on this forum and to start this whole process of dealing with this issue. I can do a lot of things today, but I don't have much time. First of all, I'm late getting on because we had a tornado out here in Iowa where I am, and lots of trees are down and people are hurt and stuff. And we have no internet. I just figured out how to get on the internet without being on the internet. But anyway, let me just say that the whole history of Black people has been a struggle for education. I could go all the way back to slavery, which I won't. I could go all the way back to Jim Crow and all of the segregated, unequal education that people experienced. I could talk about Booker T. Washington, talking about a whole nation went to school after emancipation. I won't do any of that because I don't have time. So let me just say this, that the reason why these schools, especially these sort of elite private schools, started taking Black students at all was because of protests and insistence on it in the South, that they started doing that in the 1960s, or people suing them or some kind of pressure that was put on. And the fact that they were no longer able to get tax exemptions from the IRS as a nonprofit if they were discriminating on the basis of race, even if they didn't get any public money under Title VI, the Civil Rights Act, meant that there was even more urgency about getting some Black folk into the institution. The benefit of being there, though, is not just what you guys are working on to make the environment better for you where you are, which is really important. And you ought to come up with a plan at the end of this discussion. for how you're going to force that kind of reaction on the part of the school. So this won't be a one-off. But the other important thing is to change the behavior of the people who are there so that they can become, if they're racist, anti-racist, and stop behaving the way that they're behaving, so that when they go out in the world, and when you go out in the world, we have less structural racism to confront in our society. That's the benefit. And the other benefit is to be in all institutions, and especially in the ones where networks and pipelines are important for what you do after that, going on to higher education and out into the world of work. So I think it's wonderful what you're doing, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
And I am one of the millions of Black students across the country whose history has been erased and rewritten in effort to coddle and shield our white peers from understanding the atrocities committed on this soil against Black people for the past 400 years. In my own personal experience, world history courses have felt dominated by European history, and United States history courses have only focused on the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of being white in America since the early 1600s. Because of the slavery that's been glossed over, the lynchings that go unmentioned, and the oversimplified laws that kept our ancestors from existing freely, it is clear that we cannot count on our education system to teach us our history. Black history is lost in our education system, and I am a firm believer that erasing Black history has been entirely intentional. According to a study conducted by CBS back in February called 50 States, 50 Ways of Teaching America's Past, only 7 states do not require history books to mention slavery. 8 states do not mention information on the civil rights movement at all. 2 require mention of white supremacy, and 8 do not mandate information. 16 note the cause of the Civil War as simply states' rights, leaving out the real reason, which was states' rights to enslave our ancestors. If you've heard of the windows and mirrors analogy being used at your school, where you need windows that give you insight into the identities of others and mirrors within which you can see your own identity, it's clear that there are little to no mirrors for Black students, but plenty for our white peers. In addition to an inaccurate education, there's a lack of Black representation in the faculties of predominantly white institutions. In attending PWIs since kindergarten, I've only had 1 Black teacher. For example, at my current school, just under 4% of the entire pre-K through 12 faculty is Black. Lack of representation in our schools makes us constantly untrusting of the environments we're in and of the people we're around all day. Lack of representation immediately discourages Black students, given that there are few people, if not none, that could possibly understand the experience of being Black in this country. By teaching accurate history and promoting the diversity and representation that students need to flourish, PWIs can finally begin to start their long journeys towards being actively anti-racist institutions. And a word of advice for Black students: don't allow your PWIs to constantly use you as a guide for what they should be doing to do better. They must do that on their own.
If you haven't heard already, America is a pretty racist country. That's not new news. That's about as obvious of a fact as the sky is blue. But there surely is a time in a Black person's life where the word racism and the bliss of not fully comprehending the horror of that evil collide to create an eternal nightmare that doesn't cease when you wake up the next day. For me, that revelation happened at a mere 13 years old. Growing up, my late grandmother Canzetta, after every Student of the Month accomplishment or every successful straight A report card, reiterated an adage to me that I'm sure everyone who has the same skin color as mine has heard from a family member before. As a Black person, you have to work twice as hard for only half as much. Like many other Black students who go off to boarding school at a young age, half as much often felt like nothing. Don't get it twisted now. I was raised in all Black communities in South Orange and Irvington, New Jersey, where I would regularly see Black love from couples who held hands walking to ice cream dates, Black success from Dr. Obi, who was my pediatrician since the day I was born, and Black joy from laughing and playing with my classmates who looked like me. In an innocent world that seemed so great, I never really thought to question it. I'd been accustomed that Black is beautiful, But with the traditions at my new school, like many other Black students have felt and continue to feel, I was told that being Black was anything but. My school's guideline of having neatly trimmed hair and hair that was not long was clearly insensitive to Black boys with dreadlocks and other Black hairstyles. Likewise, mass meetings, a party-like phenomenon where students dress up in sports clothing after study hall and dance and roughhouse in a secluded area, was an immensely frustrating experience to deal with as well due to the prevalence of blackface. Oftentimes, the Black student experience is one of trauma and frustration, which is primarily caused by racist traditions and practices such as these that are seldom questioned, and if questioned, never changed. Like many other Black students across this country, I thus equivocated my worth to how much I could grind in the books. Because if I could grind hard, flourish in every extracurricular activity, and get into a school where I wouldn't have to deal with this type of textbook racism, then maybe, just maybe, this all would have been worth it. With my acceptance into Brown University, I thought that I had finally forged a future so bright for myself that if I even so much as glanced at it, it would burn my eyes. Though there is racism everywhere, I would finally be in an institution where I felt like I could at least get that half as much my grandmother was telling me about, where I at least felt like the school someone wanted me to be there. Boy, was I wrong. Although my social experience at Brown has been incredible, the racism here is the same wolf with a different set of sheep's clothing. Brown is well known for being a college campus of inclusivity and free expression, where protesting at the Rhode Island State House, attending minority peer council workshops, and studying at the Brown Center for Students of Color are common activities for Black students. However, I've also observed that the university itself has had a tradition of using these positives as a veil to minimize and hide very racially insensitive decisions. The coronavirus outbreak led to a widespread student demand to have a universal pass system for the semester, as many Black students such as myself do not have the same resources at home to perform at an optimal level. When Brown explained why we would not partake in this nationwide trend, the explanation was very much, we all need to pick ourselves up by the bootstraps during this tough time, instead of truly recognizing Black students are often not on an equal playing field as their white counterparts.
I have gone to predominantly white institutions, PWIs, ever since I could walk. My family, like many other Black families in the States, sent me to PWIs over public schools in hopes that it would lead me on the path to a higher education that many other Black students struggle to receive due to the institutionalized racism that presides in our country's education system. While my family was confident that these schools would be a better option academically, they failed to grasp how dire the emotional and psychological consequences would be. The toll of being a minority, especially a Black female in a predominantly white environment, was one that took a hit to my self-confidence and my identity. I knew that I was different from my peers from the beginning. My peers would pull and prod at my hair, commenting on its fluffy, poofy, and frizzy nature. Others would call it a wig, tell me it reminded them of various animals, amongst many other microaggressions. My appearance, speech, and identity was under constant ridicule from both my peers and my teachers. Frantz Fanon, a West Indian psychiatrist and political philosopher, spoke of the juxtaposition of the Black psyche in a white world as one where, the more the Black Antillian assimilates to the French language, the whiter he gets. Fanon described this to any race who is subject to colonization, insinuating the notion that a Black person has two identities, one with his Black kin and one with white people. Through education, status, and income, Black people often find themselves becoming closer to the ideal and the American dream, closer to being white. Unfortunately, I was one of the many Black students who developed this mentality. I rejected my Blackness and everything that reminded me of it, and in turn rejected myself and my sense of agency. The mask I wore for so many years was one that negatively impacted my view of my race as well as my gender. Black women and girls exist within the matrix of intersectionality, a specific location whereby multiple systems of oppression work in tandem to subjugate, marginalize, and amplify their otherness. This positionality not only influences how Black women have to define their shared spaces, but also creates a transformative space for Black women and girls to develop both gender and race complexes. High school is notoriously toilsome, everywhere and for all students. But being a Black student at a PWI boarding school with a history of segregation and white supremacy is a different story. The inherent elitism that presides in the prep school environment is apparent, but the institutionalized racism within many of these schools can go unnoticed. African American students are 3.8 times more likely to receive one or more suspensions as white students, according to data released by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. Analysis of that same federal report show that in white suburban schools, Black students are discouraged from taking AP courses, and in some school districts, white students are twice as likely as Black and Hispanic to be enrolled in at least one AP class. Nationwide, school boards and teachers are overwhelmingly white and lack the understanding of being Black in America. We need racial equity, awareness, anti-racism ideologies, and implicit bias training in all schools. We need change.
Why proximity to whiteness has become the standard. Especially now with the current pandemic, it's especially alarming and concerning for Black students who are returning to their school campuses. In the US, Black people are dying 2.5 times the rate of white people from this virus. With these statistics, it's obvious that Black students are going to be at risk, and we need our schools to care about our lives and take the extra steps needed in order to protect us. Not only that, but we need to protect the Black communities around us. Oftentimes, we can become consumed by the bubbles of our schools that we forget the more vulnerable people around us. Is it worth thousands of students returning to campuses if it results in increased cases for the Black and Brown communities around us? I urge students of color to pay attention to how their institutions treat the people of color who aren't their students in their surrounding communities. Their treatment of these communities is a reflection of how they see us and the value that they place on our lives. As students, we are awarded certain privileges, but what happens when we go out into the real world and we no longer have a student ID or school paraphernalia? We must ensure that Black Lives Matter and there can be no exceptions.
Part of the challenge is how do we break the back of the value gap that in some ways sets in motion those processes that in some ways try to commit soul murder, that try to get on the inside, where you doubt your voice, where you outsource your courage, where you accommodate yourself to a world that degrades and denies you standing. Baldwin insisted that if you are to be truly educated, right, it requires a certain kind of acceptance of a willingness to question the world as it is. So what BSA is, in my eyes, right, is a rejection of this idea that PWIs are these spaces that you should be thankful to be walking in or walking among, but rather you need to take possession of them. Walk in these spaces on your own terms, but figure that out for yourself. What does it mean to begin that journey now, so that when you enter a brown Roysworth, you're walking with a different kind of gait? So that when you end up in these other institutions, you're not giving your spirit over to these places who don't give a damn about you. I keep telling my students over these so many years, and I'll shut up after this. Why would you give your soul to these places? Why would you even open up the possibility that they could have you judge yourself through their lens? Flip the damn script.
Obviously, I've been teaching at a PWI for a while, and I started at a historically Black college and university, a college in my case, Knoxville College. And that experience was so winning because it was so centering. It was so profoundly engaging. It gave me a sense of who I am further as a human being. And so I think it's extremely important to talk about being Black without apology or explanation. We ain't apologizing for who we are, because who we are, who you are, as a student of color, as a Black student at a predominantly white institution, means that you bring such intelligence, such insight, such passion, such power, that you pull from and draw from the long legacy and the profound trajectory of liberation and emancipation that produced you. And even though you may not have yet caught up intellectually with the profound interpretation of that legacy, you are in your body the fruit of a long quest in Black America for us to be able to come into spots and spaces, and even indeed spirits, that have tended to reject us, to resist us, to demonize us, to cast aspersions on us, to act like we ain't what we are. And so to be in those institutions, to be in those spaces, is to occupy them with the understanding that you bring to bear that tremendous history, that tremendous tradition, that tremendous trajectory. And even though you may not be fully aware of it, as the fruit of that labor, as the manifestation of the imagination of your great-great-grandmothers and great-great-grandfathers and your other ancestors, there's a sense of pride. There's a sense of loyalty to them in the best sense of that word. So there's no need to apologize. There's no need to apologize for the blackness you bring.
Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." Every single day of my PWI education, I fight dual consciousness. Every single day of high school, I woke up upset, feeling like I had to prove something to someone. I had to prove that I was worthy of attention. I had to prove that I was smarter than what people thought I was. I had to prove that Black people as a whole were more than the stereotypes. Every day I fought and fought and fought. People butchering slang in a warped attempt to relate to me. People calling me white because I spoke eloquently. People laughing at me when I told them that one day I would be successful. It was enough of a trauma to make me want to quit on myself. They will tell you different, but I know what I experienced. I spent plenty of late nights and even more early mornings studying, working out, thinking, and praying, all for the purpose of a validation that would never come. That I'm proud of you, or I support you, that I spent every single day looking for, only came after I was accepted to multiple Ivy League schools. It came after my great friends, like my high school roommate, Roysworth Grant, breathed life into me and motivated me to keep going in light of our situation. As young, gifted Black students, all we had was each other. You see, there's a reason why a distinction between being a leader and a follower exists. When you are constantly told that you aren't enough, you have two choices. You can follow, becoming an imposter and shell of your former self, or you can lead, holding on to any sliver of hope or word of positivity to power you to have the courage to have what it takes to stand alone, to rise above the need to be loved by people who will never really accept you for being you. As a Black student at a PWI, you are always asked, what do you offer? What can you bring to the table? Today, we must make a commitment to change that. This burden of inferiority held by Black students must be eradicated. I am eternally grateful for the opportunity that I received to go to one of the best boarding schools in the country, and the opportunity that I have now to attend one of the best universities in the entire world. It is not out of spite that I am here today advocating for change. Instead, it is out of love. As James Baldwin put it, I love America more than any other country in the world. And exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. I love my high school. I love Princeton University, and I love America enough to tell them all the truth. In order for our schools and our nation to operate at their full potential, the Black community needs to be supported by all other communities. Inherent to the right to freedom of speech is the freedom to listen. And injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. If all lives truly matter, then you will hear my testimony and be as traumatized as I have been, but you also will be as hopeful as I am for a better day.
We need you to step up and to realize that we face trauma outside of the classroom and inside of the classroom, and that needs to change. And recognize that as students, if you're trying to fight, if teachers, if you're trying to fight, realize that you are not alone. We had so many saints come before us, risking their lives for us to be here today and for us to be in the educational system that we are in, but we can still change that. Push for a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion officer at your school. Make the Black Student Association at your school so you can create spaces for everyone around you. And realize the power that you have and that you are so valuable and that you matter so much and you are so loved. Thank you all for joining us today.
Hi, I'm Todd Yeary here outside Dr. King's workshop, the Rainbow Push headquarters, where people of goodwill from all walks and all places gather as comrades in the movement for justice and equality. Social justice movements have been birthed in the imaginations of people in places just like this. You can be a part of this justice movement too. Join Rainbow Push as we fight for justice in the 21st century. Go to rainbowpush.org or dial 773-FREEDOM, and remember, keep hope alive.
In 1988, America began a search for an honest vision of who we are as a people and of the problems we face as a nation. We searched for that vision as Democrats, and as Democrats, we found it, a vision of hope.
We are bigger than one language, bigger than one culture, bigger than one race, bigger than one religion. This is America. Let's expand. Let's grow. Let's build. Let's keep hope alive.
From far back in a crowded field, America began to hear a message of hope, of justice, of new direction. And we began to remember the acts of courage that changed the face of America.
Some 24 years ago, you marched across that bridge to give all Americans the right to vote. Probably one of the greatest historic acts that ever was passed. I know, Reverend Jackson, I was on the other side. So we're very happy to have you back in Selma. It's a great deal of pride to welcome you as a presidential candidate.
We Democrats welcome Jesse Jackson and his message. We rediscovered the soul of the Democratic Party. And we learned that we can be a strong, productive nation with a vibrant, growing economy, and yet not lose our compassion or our sense of justice. We Democrats began to lead America again with vision, with hope, with action. Now, we will choose our candidate for president, and in November, we will regain the White House, because in 1988, we found our vision.
Jackson fights for the homeless. Hope. Jackson fights for daycare. Hope. Jackson fights to raise minimum wage. Hope. Jackson fights for comparable work for women. Hope. Jackson fights to save our farms. Hope. He fights to end the flow of drugs. Hope. He fights to end the nuclear race. Hope. He fights to revive the people. Hope. We the people will win. Thank you very much. We the people will win.
Hearing the chants of Run, Jesse, Run all across the country, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. garnered 3.5 million votes, many of those votes to cast for the very first time, thus changing the political landscape not once, but twice. He kept hope alive, and so did we.
One of the things he always talked about was hands that pick cotton can now pick presidents. There had not been that many years ago that we as African Americans could even vote. And now not only did we have a right to vote, we also had the right to vote and pick a president of our choice. As Reverend Jackson went around the country mobilizing the thousands and thousands of people to register and to vote, there was a larger number of African American, Hispanic, and American Indian candidates elected to office than had ever been elected before, and more African American candidates than in the history of this country.
During the 2020 Democratic National Convention experience, we invite you, our Rainbow Push Coalition family, to join the DNC Black Caucus on Sunday, August 16th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for our virtual community faith event. As a tribute will be paid to the life and work of the long-distance runner, our president and founder, the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., in addition to bringing you some of the world's most influential voices in faith and civic engagement.
I'm more convinced than ever that we can win. We have fought up the rough side of the mountain. We can win. I just want young America to do me one favor. Just one favor. Exercise the right to dream. You must face reality, that which is, but then dream of the reality that ought to be, that must be. Live beyond the pain of reality with the dream of a bright tomorrow. Use hope and imagination as weapons of survival and progress. Use love to motivate you and obligate you to serve the human family. Young America, dream!
They used to say we were just 3/5 of a man, and we had to fight to be fully recognized. Back then, being counted meant marches, pickets, jail cells, and worse. One way you can show we count in less than 10 minutes is to take the 2020 census. Be a warrior for your community. Be counted and make certain adequate funds and political representation are allocated to your state and your neighborhood. Just select one of these easy options. By phone, call 844-330-2020. Online at mycensus2020.gov or simply mail in your survey. Never forget, you are somebody. Don't delay. Take the census today.
I am somebody.
Dr. Kim, I went to jail with a group of 7 students, July 17, 1960, almost 60 years ago. We never stopped moving. I lost a few jail cells and death. We never stopped moving. I thought it was time to write some of it down so the older generation can learn how we did and what we did and how global it was. Whether speaking about Mandela in South Africa, India, Qatar, Gandhi in India, here at home. This book tells the story, so please get it and give it to your friends. Read it, let's argue about it, let's discuss it.
Yep, so the book is Keeping Hope Alive, Sermons and Speeches of Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. It's quite a good collection. You know, we've got sermons and speeches from around the globe because you have made such a global impact, not just here in the US, but around the world.
Thank you for tuning in to our International Saturday morning broadcast. We need your support. Here are ways to give to Rainbow Push Coalition. Text PUSH, P-U-S-H, to 41444 to support the work of Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. and Rainbow Push Coalition. When you shop, Amazon gives. Visit Amazon Smile and select Push for Excellence as your charitable organization by starting your shopping at smile.amazon.com.
Get involved with the movement.
Somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody.
Join the movement.
If you're not a member, become a member.
I am somebody. Fighting the most important battles for freedom and justice for all.
You made us change. Oh, trying to bring closer.
Join Rainbow Push.